In the fall of 1985, a low-budget videotape was released nationwide by Sloan Publishing. Its title, We Sing Together.
The more we sing together, the more we sing together, the happier we'll be.
The videotape was revolutionary for the 1980s and became the first sing-along live-action product for young children on the market. Its plot follows a young girl, Sally, and her brother, Jonathan. When the children fall asleep at night, two of their stuffed animals, Melody the Mouse and Humbear, come to life in their dreams and take the children on a mystical adventure to Wee Sing Park. There, they run into several whimsical characters that sing songs and play games with the children. They have Sally's birthday party at Wee Sing Park before returning to the children's bedroom where the mouse and bear turn back into stuffed animals. This video was a smashing success and quite honestly revolutionary for the emerging direct-to-video market. Its success prompted the Wee Sing Company to produce 8 more videotapes through the early 1990s, the second of which would not be released until 1988. In the fall of 1987, the We Sing Together videotape would end up in the hands of Dallas, Texas resident Cheryl Leach. Cheryl was impressed with the tape's ability to capture the attention of her toddler son, Patrick. After discovering that no other tapes in the series had been released yet, Cheryl was determined to create a video series of her own. Her idea ultimately became Barney and the Backyard Gang. Barney has become an icon in today's society. He stands for love, joy, and inclusion, all things that so many of us wish the world could emulate. His idealistic principles led millions of children through their childhoods and beyond. His cult following of toddlers in the 90s put him at the status of Elvis to children. The notion of I love you, you love me was a concept bewildering to the ever-changing landscape we as a human race found ourselves in the early 90s. Barney became a beacon of hope for many, and still stands as a beacon today. The strange concept that Barney was not a product of a New York or Los Angeles production entity is still baffling to many. The fact that so many have tried and failed to replicate Barney's success has been truth-telling to what this purple dinosaur had. So many of us have become entranced by him. It's easy to forget that he isn't real but purely a figment of imagination. As much as we would wish the world we lived in would be a perfect place, and the people we associate with perfect people, those kinds of liberties are out of reach. No, Barney was a figment of our imagination, spurred by the notion of a simple plush coming to life, if we just made believe. That original Barney plush for many has represented a beacon of hope, a beacon of light, a plush that gave us security, that gave us hope for a better tomorrow. The dismay and bewilderment of many, that original Barney plush that represented so much to a generation of children has yet to surface since initially being seen in the first few Barney videotapes. That small plush prop has been a great mystery of entertainment memorabilia. Being the first Barney ever created, you'd think he'd be in a museum or archive, but nay. For the further I've investigated the whereabouts of this elusive prop, the more complex and deep the mystery becomes. For the past 2 years, I've been on the hunt for the white whale of Barney memorabilia. For the past 2 years, I've been trying to locate the missing plush. My name is Andrew Olson. Some of you know me as Barney Builder, some as the guy with the massive Barney collection. What I think of myself most as is a collector of knowledge, a historian dedicated to preserving the history and integrity of Barney the dinosaur, an individual with the purpose of ensuring the world never forgets the character that taught us to love. For without proper record, history becomes lost and forgotten.
Who's next for this, huh? How are you today? And what do you want for Christmas? You want Barney for Christmas?
As a child, the only thing I ever wanted was Barney. The Barney. The real Barney. Not the one you could buy in a store, but the Barney that appeared on screen. As I grew older and became more entranced with the history of Barney the dinosaur, I entered into the Barney fandom and realized that not a single studio doll had surfaced. Studio dolls being those specialty built Barney plush dolls that were used as props in the TV show. They differed substantially from the ones you could buy in a store. As a child, I imagined these dolls being locked away in some secret vault in Texas. But as I grew older, I realized how unlikely this occurrence would be. A doll that has always fascinated me growing up was the original plush, the one built for the original trilogy of Barney videos. The little purple dinosaur that started it all. This little doll introduced the world to Barney. He became the first Barney that many people would know. Many would come after him, but none attracted the mysterious and reputation that this original plush would garner. Part of his fascination within Barney fans is that he was the first and least used of dolls. There are only a handful of shots of him that appear in the home videos, all of which are subject to low resolution of the VHS tapes from the late 1980s. Back in the spring of 2021, I asked myself the question, where is the little purple guy now? The last time he was publicly seen, to my knowledge, was in 1989 with the release of A Day at the Beach. No behind-the-scenes photographs had surfaced, no promotional stills had been taken. The only evidence of this plush ever having existed can be seen in the 3 home videos that he was featured in. The question that plagued me was in regards to his whereabouts. To my knowledge, with big studios in Los Angeles and New York, it's up to the producers and the studios themselves to decide where these props go after filming. Normally, these will either end up being stored in the studio's archive, gifted to crew members, or sold at auction. The Lions Group, the studio that produced Barney and the Backyard Gang, had never produced something to the scale of Barney prior, and they were pretty new to the entire video industry as a whole. This led me to believe that they really did not have a planned process in place for prop storage or distribution of assets back in the late 1980s. So this begged the question, where do I even start looking? There could have been hundreds of people with knowledge and hundreds of suspects. I needed to narrow it down. First, I need to determine the individual that built the original doll. And the best place to find that information? The credits. I scanned through the credits for the first 3 home videos, hoping a name would pop out. The entire art department instantly became suspects in my investigation. Jamie Ruth Conner, series art director, CJ McCormick, props master, Anita Dallas, set decorator, and Nettie Weber, production assistant. You see, when they were filming these original 3 videos in 1988, that was supposed to be it. They didn't know if Barney would be successful, if he would resonate with people as they had hoped. The words "the end" even appear at the end of the last tape in the series, and that was supposed to be the conclusion of the trilogy. Obviously, Barney was a hit success, and ended up taking off, but at the time, there were so many unknowns. The fate of all the leftover props fit into those unknowns. If there were no plans to continue the series, then what would the use of a Barney plush be to the studio? For all I knew, that doll could have been taken home and given to a dog, or thrown in the trash, or destroyed. An issue I immediately ran into when trying to track people down was that the entire art department turned over between the first 3 videos and the series reprisal in 1990. Now it's been over 30 years since they filmed these videos in 1988. Some people may not live in the Dallas area anymore. Some may have passed on or have since gotten married and changed names. I started at the top of my list with Jamie Ruth Conner. She looked like a promising contender, and by the looks of it, Barney wasn't her first rodeo with children's video production.
It's gonna be happy, it's gonna be great. I gotta hurry, don't wanna be late. I can learn to be the best that I can possibly be. Where? Down at the Sunshine Factory. The place isn't fancy, it's not very wide. But we make sunshine deep down inside. You don't have to buy it 'cause it's yours for free. Where? Down at the Sunshine Factory.
Prior to Barney, she worked on the children's show Sunshine Factory in the early 80s. a Christian television series that was filled with puppets and colorful sets. I began searching. I turned to Google and searched all of Texas for Jamie Conner. Nothing. I turned to old address books to look for Jamie, but was luckily able to find an old address for her. Excited that I found some sort of useful information, I immediately wrote a letter explaining my mission and asked for help. A few weeks later, I received a letter back in the mail. Return to sender. Either it was the wrong Jamie Conner or she did not wish to be contacted. Either way, it was a devastating blow. The next on my list was CJ McCormick. CJ, could that be a girl name or a boy? What did it stand for? It had to be a nickname. Without further knowledge, it became impossible to search for her contact information. It seemed that I had just begun my search and was already hitting a brick wall. One day while Christmas shopping, believe it or not, I came across an art page on Facebook. I began scrolling through this nameless artist's paintings and drawings, and I came to one drawing in particular that caught my eye. In the corner, I zoomed in to see the artist's signature, J.R. Conner. Had I found the needle in the haystack? Excited, I messaged immediately. I couldn't be too forthright though, and asked if she was the Jamie Ruth Conner. No, that would be too creepy. I only had one chance for a first impression, and this was it. Instead of diving right in and talking about Barney, I played it cool and followed my original intent. Why I'd come across her page in the first place. I was Christmas shopping, and I wanted her to do a commission for me. We began talking about her art, and believe it or not, she brought Barney up to me. I didn't have to figure out a way to not sound stalkerish. She saw on my personal Facebook profile that I owned a company that manufactured puppets. She then told me how the beginning of her career was full of puppets and Barney. We texted back and forth, and then I popped the ultimate question. I sent her a picture of a replica doll that I had made and asked her if she knew who built the original. Her answer was both exciting and slightly disappointing. Yes, I built that little fat doll. Do you know where he is? She was asking me the very question I came to her for, the location of the original Barney doll. Nevertheless, I felt that I was getting closer to answers. If Jamie did not have the doll herself, maybe she had some clues as to where it ended up. I asked Jamie if I could come down to Texas and talk in more depth about Barney. She gleefully agreed, so I hopped on a plane and heard the full story behind that doll.
John coached me one day, says, we have a problem. And so I said, well, tell me what's the problem. And he said, we don't have a Barney dog. And I had not seen all the finished scripts. I just had breakdowns, of different scenes. And so I said, what do you mean you don't have a Barney dog? And you get that contract? And no, everybody forgot. I knew basically how to do it, but I had never made a stuffed animal. I made doll clothes when I was a kid, but I had never done anything like that. And so I went to the kid's store and bought a plush animal. I thought, yeah, but this isn't going to work. It's got to be stiff. It's got to sit up. It can't, even though it needs to look kind of plush, it's got to be stiff because it's going to be a prop and it has to be able to handle. So I made two. First one was like, oh God, this ain't gonna work. This is ridiculous. And so I went out looking for more fabric and came back and stuffed it with thicker stuff, a ponytail, and put some weights in his feet and pretty much created, from the pattern, but I took bigger seams and brought it down, made it smaller. And then I filled it with the polyfoil, and I filled it so packed in there. I probably should have used sawdust or something, but I just kept packing it in there. And then his head was like this, the sky. Okay, so I took a big tuck under his chin. I just hand whipped a big tuck under there, brought his head down, and the one you gave me had the eyelids in pink, but he did. I don't think he would. Can't remember pink. I don't think I used pink. I think, and he didn't have a line over his eye either. That was something that was created by the person who did the animation for the clink.
Interesting. Okay.
Okay, that's not what he actually looked like. But
He had no eyelids?
he had a thing there, but it wasn't.
Okay.
I think it was purple. I think it was the purple that I used to make it.
Okay.
And it was a quilting fabric that didn't have quilting on it. It had fold backing. So they don't do that anymore. They don't make that fabric anymore. It was a knitted fabric with a fold backing that was adhered with kind of a fake adhesive. And I stitched it all together, and I made little round yellow dots for his toes and green dots for his back, and his stomach had a tuck in it too. It ended up being kind of big. I said, well, and by that time I was exhausted, and so I said, this is it. This is what it's got to be. And I wasn't happy with it, but they seemed okay with it. So I was like, if I hadn't had time, I probably would have made 5 or 6 of them, and then all of them would have been worth something today, and I probably would have kept one over for myself. But the key thing was that I wanted to make him look happy, and he actually had an inner-line mouth, so it was it was actually open in there. It wasn't just like that. It was actually an opening, which I did with all my puppets, so that if somebody wanted to make a puppet talk, they could make it talk. And I brought it in, and that day it went into production. It was shot that day in the garden seat out on the patio of the backyard. And I saw him one thing. I said, "Are you going to do anything to make him look a little bit more animated?" And John said, "Don't worry about it. We're going to animate his eye. We're going to make him wink and give him a twinkle and give him a little starburst." And wow. John came to me and said, okay, he never asked me to redo the doll. They used it through everything. He said, guard this like gold. I said, okay. And that's why I put it in that box, under mock, so it would be there. And somebody went and got him out of that box. And I don't know what happened to him after that. The reason I know somebody got into that box is because when they did a show using the duck umbrellas, I had put those umbrellas in that box. So somebody had got into the box. And when I saw those ducks going quack, 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 all together with a quack, 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 well, then that's what I think I told you at that time that somebody got into that box, because that was in the very same thing. And he had his own little box inside the box.
Wow. So
they had to have gone through everything and looked for it. But there were lots of props like that. Hats, Marty's costumes. All of Marty's costumes were put in there. Where did I actually put it?
Yeah.
There was a forklift at the very back. Okay, at the very back behind the studio. Behind there were some big double doors that went out to the dog. As you're going out the doors, to the right of the doors out of the studio, there was a whole section that went up to and an attic over the studio.
For last was?
I remember getting the forklift and clearing it up there.
Wow.
So somebody got the forklift, he took it down. But I did leave word before I left that the props box was up in the lawn.
Yeah.
And it was at the very end of the building. So it was not like it got mixed up with anything from the Lions group stuff.
Yeah.
It was at the very end of the building. Wow. Specifically studio. Stunning.
Step 1 was complete. Find the original doll. It was last seen in Color Dynamics in a wooden crate along with Moonkin and some other specialty props. Now that I knew where Jamie last saw it, it was time to move on to other suspects that may have information. The question now became, who had access to the crate? the individual that probably handled the doll the most was the series prop master, CJ McCormick. She was next on my list of people to track down. I learned from Jamie that CJ was a woman, and that helped narrow my search down tremendously. I looked through phone books, public records, social media accounts. CJ was nowhere to be found. Until one day, I came across some old public data that listed an old email address for CJ McCormick. I hurriedly wrote an email praying it was the correct person, and within 24 hours, I received a reply saying it was CJ McCormick that worked on the Barney series in 1988.
The original dinosaur plush prop that Jamie built.
Right.
Do you ever, I built a little replica of him.
Yes. Oh, I remember. Yeah.
Do you know what ever happened to this guy after they're done?
No.
You don't?
No. I would not have kept anything.
Another person was crossed off my list. If the original art department didn't know where the doll could be, maybe the succeeding art department would know. I started to ask people who were involved with the next set of videos, starting with the succeeding art director, Elizabeth Sagan-Veltman. She claimed that there was no prop storage when she came in, and she never recalled seeing the doll in person. The information I now had was that the plush went missing sometime between August of 1988 and January of 1990, when production began on Waiting for Santa. I remember something that Jamie told me in our meeting. The duck umbrellas that were used in the backyard show were also stored in the same wooden crate as the Barney plush. And then I came across this video. That video was recorded in December of 1988, just 4 months after the doll was last seen by Jamie Ruth Conner. Someone between August of 1988 and December of 1990 had gotten into the wooden crate that Jamie had left in the studio. The question is, who? Who would have had access to the studio during that time? Well, the company that housed the studio, Color Dynamics, was a very large facility employing dozens of individuals. There were lots of people that had access to the studio shipping bay, and there were lots of suspects. Next on my list had to be the full-time DLM and Lions Group employees, starting with the producers of the video, Cheryl Leach, John Grable, Dennis DeShazer, and Carol Adams Bowers. If all else, there's one person that had to know where the original prop was. I was confident that either she had it herself or knew its fate. My next stop would be the mother of Barney herself, Cheryl Leach. I reached out to Cheryl and asked if she knew where Barney ended up, or if she had the original doll herself. Unfortunately, she had no knowledge of where the doll could have gone. Nearly 35 years have passed since it was last used, and it was more than likely destroyed or lost many years ago, she suspected. I ended up speaking with another crew member from that original production, and he thought that they may have gifted the original plush to John Grable, the director and producer from the series, as a parting gift from the studio. There was one problem. John Grable passed away in 2016. There was no way I could ask if he knew the doll's whereabouts. I then remembered what CJ McCormick had told me in our meeting. She was still good friends with John's first wife. I emailed CJ and asked if she would be willing to talk to John's first wife about the possibility of John being in possession of the original plush. She did so, and unfortunately his wife had no recollection of John ever having it. My next feat would be to track down the first Lions Group employee. She predated working on Barney and remained with the company after the production wrapped. My next stop would be to track down co-producer Carol Adams Bowers. For over a year, I sent close to 6 letters and emails and waited for a response. Nothing. Maybe I had the wrong contact information for her. So I sent more. Still nothing. Finally, I was able to find an email address for her daughter. Her daughter informed me that Carol had developed advanced Alzheimer's at a young age, and she was in no state of mind to recall such a question. I was saddened to hear this, not only because Alzheimer's is a disgusting disease that rips loved ones' minds from their frail bodies, but also because I'd waited so long. Part of me thought for sure she had to have it. She hadn't responded to any of my emails or letters, and now I know why. My options were running out, and my spirit was starting to face discouragement. The thought came to me, the last time the doll was seen was in August 1988, right before Jamie's contract with Lions Group was up. The last place it was seen was in Color Dynamics. What if the crate was left in the building storage area and forgotten about? What if the crate was still in there, waiting to be found? I was fortunate enough to get in touch with Tom Leach, one of Dick Leach's sons. Dick Leach being the owner of Color Dynamics, the building that the studio was housed in. The Leach family was still very much so involved in Color Dynamics. If the missing crate was still in the building, Tom would be a good person to talk to. I sent him an email, and he replied that his brother is the building manager of Color Dynamics, and he would ask him to sweep the area and search for the crate. This was my first glimmer of hope in an otherwise unsuccessful search. But alas, a couple weeks later, I heard back from them. No crate was found inside the building. So much had changed in 35 years. I thanked him for looking, and my search continued. I started sending letters and emails to anyone willing to talk. Anita Dallas, the original set director, had no knowledge. Many of the props she used were rented from a props house, and she never interacted with the doll. Dwin Tao, the succeeding director and the manager of the studio, didn't know anything about the doll either. The thought came to me that they could have sent the doll to Dakin while prototyping the first commercial Barney plush. I emailed Debbie Reese, the first VP of sales, and to see if this could have happened. She said that they did not do that. My options had dwindled, and I was out of leads. In a desperate plea for help, I ran ads through the Dallas area offering an award for the doll's discovery or knowledge of its whereabouts. Still, no one came forward. But I started to gain a reputation of being the crazy fan in search of something that could not be found. And here we are now. At the time of this recording, it's 2023. 2 years since I began this exploit. And still, I've progressed little in my quest. I haven't given up yet, though. In a final attempt to seek answers, I'm turning to you for help. For all who watch this video, if you know something, anything, about the whereabouts or fate of this doll, please email my tip line. This dinosaur is so much more than fabric and stuffing. This plush started a movement, ingrained a generation, brought the world love and light in a time when things seemed to be getting darker. The symbolism behind what this doll represents is that of hope and love. To so many of us that grew up watching Barney, he was our best friend, and someone that continues to walk by our side through life. Many have called me obsessed with this search, compulsive, greedy. I've poured my time and resources into uncovering answers. Barney was a movement of the 90s, and his legacy continues today. All this was started by a simple dinosaur plush, a dinosaur plush that for many became their guide through childhood, their lifelong friend, their mediator. My mission is not to uncover a tangible asset that was lost many years ago. It's to find a friend and put him in a place where he can be seen and enjoyed and loved for generations to come. To those who did not grow up watching Barney, they may never understand the symbolism that this original doll represents. I've intentionally titled this video Part 1 in hopes that answers will be brought about. Whether or not Part 2 happens is up to you. This attempt may be futile, but I cannot rest easy until I know that I've done everything in my power to find answers regarding this plush. So the question beckons: was the original Barney doll lost, stolen, or destroyed? Until more answers are sought, we may never know.